Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to start building a craft cat food and water bowl holder, and it's cat shaped. And this is something that my mom picked up with my grandma about 30 years ago at a craft fair. And theirs is finally fallen, or my mom's is finally fallen apart. And so she asked me to make her a new one. So I'm gonna give that a shot. And the twist on this is I'm gonna try to use just 3 power tools. I'm gonna use my circular saw, a jigsaw, and a drill. So the first thing I need to do is I get the tape measure and I'm going to mark off 14 inches, but I noticed that the end of this board is a little beat up and cupped and has staples in it and stuff. So the first thing I do is I'm just going to take about 1 inch off this board. Now, I think I mentioned this in one of these other videos, but I really don't enjoy using the circular saw. As a lefty, it's just kind of hard because you really have to hold it with your right hand and do all of your cutting with your right hand, and then your left is just kind of a guide, or I'm holding the straight edge there as a guide. Not only that is, since it's not affixed to anything, they're kind of dangerous. If you just got to pay close attention, make sure the guard is working, make sure you practice the cut, the depth is set, there's nothing underneath that you're gonna chop off. You got to keep the cord out of the way. So right now we're unplugged, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the depth of the cut. So I just lift up the guard here, and I see that the bottom teeth are going to come out the bottom by at least one tooth length there. I can also, there's a little guide on the back of the saw right here, and there's a little white mark along the side, if I can get it just the right direction there. Anyway, you can see that little white mark, and you want to line that up with, we're cutting 1 inch wood, which is really 3/4 of an inch deep there. So I just cross-check that, and it's set on the 1 inch mark. So that'll work. So then I just throw my glasses and my earmuffs, and I'm going to set up with just my straight edge here. I'm going to want to cut just about 1 inch or so off of this, so I'll just line up my straight edge here. That puts the blade about 1 inch from the end. I'm not going for an exact measurement, but I would like to keep it square. So that's why I have this lined up. I'm actually going to do it from this edge, so it'll be square to this edge. So now that I'm all set, I'll go ahead and plug the saw in. All right, the saw's all set and the cord's out of the way, nothing underneath. And then I'm just gonna let this end drop off, so it doesn't need to be supported. And it's a 10-foot long board, so it's not gonna, I can push on as much as I want here with just a few inches hanging off, and it's not going anywhere. So when we're all lined up, rack the blade off just a bit, squeeze the trigger, get the thing spun up, and then I'll make the cut. Actually, you're supposed to leave the saw still balanced there while it winds down, so count on me for that. We'll do better next time. All right, next step here is to measure out our 14 inches from the end and mark it. I'll use a speed square, place my pencil back on the mark, run the square up against it, and go ahead and mark at 14 inches. So here's our 14-inch piece. We'll do the same thing with a 10-incher and then 2 6-inchers. Now 3 of these boards, the 14-incher, the 10-incher, and then one of the 6s have to be cut down to 8 inches wide. So I'm just taking a look at each edge of the board and seeing which one is the best looking piece, and then lopping off the side that has any dents or knots or something in it. This one had a little bit on both sides, so I already sliced this side smooth, and this one you can see has a pretty good knot in there, so I'm going to slice this one off next. Now we got this one down to 6 inches. Sorry, we had it down to 8 inches wide. So this one is our 10 by 8. The next one we'll get will be our 12, and then one of our 6s. Get those down to 8 inches. This one's got a pretty good gouge here. It's got a little bit of a knot there. I'm going to take about a 1/4 inch off this side and then take the rest off this side to make it nice and straight. Just to get kind of a basic layout of the piece, this will be the cat's head on this end, so we'll draw that and cut that in. This will be where the bowls are held, here in the center. So we'll be cutting 2 big holes in there to hold the bowls, and then this will be the cat's back end, back here. We'll carve that out, and then finally we'll carve this, and it'll be the tail back there. So we'll draw those out and start getting them cut with the jigsaw. And one other thing I wanted to point out is it would have been easier to, if your board doesn't have a lot of knots and cuts and stuff along the edges, you know, here and here, that you need to change how much you're cutting off each side depending on where you are on the board. It's easier just to cut, you know, something a little long, so you're 14 plus 10 plus 6 plus 6, and then give yourself about 5 more inches and cut your board to that length first, and then make one long straight rip cut to get them all the same width. The way I did it is a little more complicated, but that's because just where that board didn't have that long of a stretch without nicks and gouges and knots and stuff that I wanted to cut out of there. So I just went section by section and then took a little bit off each side to get it to its final width. But much easier if you just, you know, cut it a little oversized, rip it to the, you know, the long cut to the width you want, and then chop it into your 14, 10, 6, 6 from there. So that's just the other way to do it. And I should have picked, well, some better boards maybe, but these ones were arrow straight for picking them up from a home store and had very little cupping and bowing. So, you know, for the short sections we're doing, we can get some relatively straight boards pretty easily that way. So that's why I went the method that I did. All right, for the next part of this video, I just have to say I am not an artist by any means. So I'll show you here in this next little clip what I had to work with. So this was the cat bowl holder thing that my mom had gotten with my grandma at the craft fair all those years ago. So that's what I had as my example. So here it is. So using that as my inspiration, I got a chunk of paper and I just cut it down to 8 by 10, and then folded it in half so I'd have a, you know, so I can make it somewhat even on either side. folded it an inch in from either side, so that gives me the dimensions, you know, 6 inches, you know, for where when this thing is upright. That's the width of the actual holder that's going to be connected to it on the back side. And then I just drew a cat somewhere in there. So using the other one as an example, I know that the feet were full width of 8 inches across, that they kind of came into about the 6-inch mark and then curved up so that it's 6 inches wide, basically where that board is going to fit across there. I had an arch in the middle where the cat's legs go, and then that's what, you know, actually holds that board above the ground. And then it kind of curved into a circular head. So I just turned a bowl upside down, drew a circle, and then, you know, kind of erased it down here to blend it into the shoulders. Drew little triangle ears up at the top. And then, you know, all of the face and stuff is going to be paint. I just kind of drew it in to make sure the proportions are about right. And I would say it's not terrible. I kind of wish, you know, the head was a little more elongated, not quite so circular, and then the shoulders blended in a little more, but I'll mess with it a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to cut out the outline, set that down on my board, trace it out, and then cut it out with the jigsaw. All right, next step here is to trace out that cat that we drew yesterday on the wood. I went ahead and cut him out. All right, so here's my jigsaw I'm going to use. Right now I have a plexiglass cutting blade in there, but I think I'm going to go with this thin one. So it, you know, it's pretty narrow, so I ought to be able to make turns, and the teeth are kind of offset. So again, they'll cut one side to the other. So I think that'll help me make turns in there. I'm by far no expert, but we'll swap that blade out, give it a shot. All right, so got the blade changed out and hooked right in there nice and thin. I tried it out on a scrap piece, and it cuts real slow because the teeth are pretty small, but it makes a really tight curve. So I think this will do it. It'll just take a little while, but we'll get right at it. All right, so there's our cat piece cut out. So that's front half. Now we'll gotta do the back half. All right, before we get to the back of the cat, I'm gonna go ahead and make the base, basically the body of the cat, where the bowls sit. So what I did is I bought these plastic bowls. Actually, they're Rubbermaid, sorry. Rubbermaid take-alongs, small bowls with lids, 3.2 cups each, which should be plenty enough for the food and just about right for water if you're gonna change it every day for one cat. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trace those out on the board, and I'll show you exactly how I'm doing that next. So first I put a center line right down the middle of the board. It's 8 inches across, so I just measured four inches in and drew a line across. Then I placed the bowls, centering them up on that line. And then to get the spacing kind of even, I just put the lip of each bowl, or the handle here, 3/8 of an inch in from the edge. And that is where I want them to go. So I'm just gonna trace around the outside, and then I'll cut it out with the jigsaw later. Now, what to remember is the bowl is going to sit in here surrounded by the wood. So what I traced is right at about on this edge of the bowl. And really I want it, you know, this inside. So I don't want it around the lip, because then the only thing holding it up will be the little handles. I want it actually the inner circle there as far as width around, or circumference of the circle, so that it sets down in there. I'll measure that out and then offset that circle to the inside. Another way to do it would be to just cut this lip off completely, because they come in a pack of 4. I only need 2 for this, so I could cut that lip off and then just trace real easily around that inside there. All right, time for power tool number 3. I'm gonna cut or drill a hole in the center here. Cut a hole right in the middle of this one that I have marked out, that I can start my saw. All right, now that we have our 2 holes in there, I'm going to neck it down, because it has to come from 8 inches to about 6 inches. So I'm going to take a little bit off either side, and I'm going to start at about the closest point of the hole on either side, and I'm just going to cut an angle down in to where we took our inch off of each side. So I'll mark those quick. Now you can kind of see where this lines up. So our front of the cat, and then how it's necked down there. All right, for the back end of the cat, I think I'm gonna do the same thing, as I'm just gonna trace around what I did for the front end of the cat. And then I'm going to, instead of putting the head on it, obviously, I'm going to just curve this top part up. So there's bottom part of the cat, and I'm just gonna make this kind of a smooth curve. So back end of a cat. All right, now we have back end of the cat. All right, for the last piece, I have the tail of the cat, which we kind of already talked about, I think, how I set it up on here, but this will, you know, glue on to back of the cat, and it'll stick up about 4 inches or so above this to make about the same height as the front of the cat. So I just kind of freehand drew this in a shape that looked good to me, so I'll cut it out again with the jigsaw and we'll see how it looks. And here's our cat tail. It can go on the back end of the cat. One thing I will say about this jigsaw blade that I'm using, it does leave quite a bit of, I don't know if you can see that, just quite a bit of tear out there along the top. So it'll take a bunch of sanding. I'm going to sand off these edges anyway, but it's going to take a lot of sanding to kind of smooth all that out. So maybe not the best saw blade for this, but it was able to make those nice tight curves. I mean, that's pretty tight. Obviously, you could do this on a bandsaw probably a lot quicker and easier, as long as your bandsaw had a pretty thin blade on it as well. But you can be a lot more precise, you know, just holding it up against the saw. But I wanted to do this with just these three power hand tools, basically the circular saw, the power drill, and then the jigsaw. So I'm going to hand sand too. It'd be nice to use a powered sander on this as well, but we'll hand sand it, and then it should be just drill and screws to put it together, and then a little bit of paint, make it look cute.